Welcome everyone, and thank you for making the time today and joining this webinar about OpenRefine. I hope everyone is doing well. My name is Adina Chokoyo. I work in the Data Publishing Services team at Europeana, and I'll be kicking off today's session. Before we start, I would like to mention some housekeeping rules. Please make sure your microphone is muted throughout the session and only unmute yourself when you have a question to ask to the presenters. If questions arise during the session, please add them to the document that was shared earlier. As mentioned, this webinar is recorded and will be made available online. If anyone has a problem with that, please let us know afterwards. The recording, relevant documents, and resources will be made available on Europeana Pro shortly after this session. Our main speakers today are Cosmina Berta and Tom Miles, with experience in working with OpenRefine, and Henning Scholz and Rob Davies. To briefly introduce them to you, Cosmina has been working for the German Digital Library since 2013 in the Service and Data Management Department. Among her responsibilities are data delivery to Europeana, ingest and data quality aspects. She is currently working in the Department Product Development and Innovation and heads the project Europeana Common Culture on behalf of the German Digital Library. Tom is based at the British Library in the Sound and Vision Department. He began working with Europeana projects back in 2013, first on Europeana Creative and then as package lead for aggregation on Europeana Sound. He's a metadata coordinator in the domain aggregator Europeana Sounds as part of the Digital Service Infrastructure project. Henning is the manager of Data Publishing Services team. You all know him, and yeah, the two of them above also, where he's responsible for the relationships with Europeana data partners, and he'll tell us more about the context and purpose of this webinar. And last but not least, Rob is currently working for Digital Heritage Research Laboratory at Cyprus University of Technology. And in the context of Common Culture project, he leads Activity 6, expert support, specifically the task related to institutional and professional capacity building, within which this series of webinars is located. He'll moderate the questions at the end of the presentation and close this session. And now, having said that, Henning, I'm handing over to you, hoping that yeah, we'll hear from Tom or we'll see him join at some point.
Yeah, thank you, Adina, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. And yeah, I'm really happy seeing so many of you, and also, yeah, it's really a lot of known faces, and also a lot of people we have not met and seen before. That's really great that this got so nicely picked up and also distributed among all of you. And as there are a few new people in this webinar, maybe a few words to explain a bit the context and where this is all coming from, because the story goes back to the aggregator forum meeting last year in April. It's a 1 year story from now, where we were asking aggregators about their needs for training, on what topics aggregators would like to know more about. But we also ask all aggregators on what they can offer training opportunities for their colleagues among the aggregators, what kind of peer-to-peer training we can offer where we have the experts in the room. And it was really, we ended up with really quite a long list, more than 20 topics came up, and then we started to sort them. We've taken this list into the Common Culture project, and yeah, with Rob Davies, we worked on sorting the list, prioritizing this list, and looking also into where can we start to develop something. And as Rob is the activity lead on the capacity building work in the Common Culture project, we looked into those topics and yeah, looked in particular where Common Culture partners are involved, so we can start with some work. And eventually it was Cosmina who volunteered then to go first with the webinar we are having today. And yeah, even if he's not there yet, I still can't see him. Like Tom joined Cosmina in the preparation and for this, and I'm very happy about this. And I hope he will still come on board for this session, even if Tom is not involved in the Common Culture project. So with this, yeah, thank you, Adina, thank you, Rob, Cosmina, and Tom for preparing this. And I'm handing over now to Cosmina, who will then take you through the OpenRefine tool and what can we do with this. Thanks.
Thank you, Henning. So the purpose of this webinar is to ease our work with data, because we all work with sets of data and we're expected to handle bigger or smaller amounts of data, and also data that is correct and consistent, and data that is less correct or consistent, which is mainly very often so. We work with source data in different formats. We analyze it, we try to improve it in order to get the most information out of it. But data is complicated. Data is hard to analyze. There are errors and inconsistencies in the collection. So what we want to achieve here is to get a bit acquainted with a tool that can help remove some of the errors and inconsistencies in the data set, and without the need of expert knowledge. Nobody has to be qualified as a software engineer to use OpenRefine. So the structure of this webinar is, we will talk about a little bit about the tool, about installing the tool, importing the data, what kind of data we can process with OpenRefine, how do we get to know our data, how do we explore it, various operations that we can do with it, project history, various extensions that we can attach to OpenRefine, and some links where we can learn more about it. Right. In the next slide, what is OpenRefine actually? OpenRefine was Google Refine before, and today OpenRefine is a community-run and open-source software to refine your data. The community behind OpenRefine is very active and very helpful, and every time I had a question, they were very quick to answer it and very competent. It is the desktop application that uses your web browser as a graphical interface, which I found particularly useful. And it is described as a power tool for working with messy data. Or Tom's expression is here, Excel on steroids. It can help you get an overview of a data set, to get statistical information, to resolve inconsistencies like spelling errors and so on, or to standardize date formatting. It can help you split data into more granular parts. We will show you a few examples about that. We can also enhance a data set with data from other sources like controlled vocabularies. which is particularly helpful, I found. Many people ask, so, okay, what's the difference between Excel and OpenRefine? In my experience, Excel works with clean data, that data that is well organized, especially if it's automatically generated. If you have clean data that simply needs a bit of reorganization, you're better off using Excel or Python or Pandas or any other database software. But for data that is full of mistakes, inconsistent, and so on, OpenRefine is here to your rescue. Okay, so in the next slide, we can talk about installing OpenRefine and importing data with it. To install OpenRefine, you click on the link here on the slide. It's valid for Windows, Mac, and Linux. Then you get a zip file that you download and unzip on your computer. If you click on OpenRefine Excel or on OpenRefine Bat, OpenRefine will open in your browser. And here is really important, don't try to use it in Internet Explorer because my experience was that it doesn't really work. Best results you can achieve with Firefox or Chrome. In the next slide, we have a list of data that can be processed with OpenRefine. We can process tab separated values, data, comma separated, Excel, of course, which is really easy to import as it's tabular in format, but I worked mainly with XML files that have to be a little bit prepared before you import it in OpenRefine. In the next slide, you can see the importing options. So you can upload data locally from your own PC. You can upload data from a web address. Here in my screenshot, I have the OAI PMH interface address link. You can also copy and paste your data if it's not a lot of data. There's a form you can fill in with your data from your clipboard. And also, it works, it imports data from SQL databases and so on. In the next slide, as I said, if you import an XML file, like it's very often the case, the data has to be parsed. That means you have to communicate OpenRefine where your record begins and where your record ends. So to speak, which is your splitter between records, and then OpenRefine will, as we see in the next slide, import your data in a tabular format. So now you get a really good visualization of the data already. This is what is really useful with working in OpenRefine. It shows you the data in tabular format, and this is really very good for understanding data and seeing the mistakes. So after importing your data and getting a preview of it, you can name your project. So working on a set of data is called project. So you can give your project a name and then click on Create Project. So in the next slide, we would look into exploring data. How do we get acquainted to the data? Faceting, what is faceting and what is clustering? And here I would go to OpenRefine Live if Adina can make me presenter. Okay, so we have our data organized like this. We have subjects, we have keywords, we have information about this publication, we have the language and so on. And here we would like to see how many times this category keyword is present in our data. And in order to do that, we are going to facet the data using this text facet feature. So we have here on the left, we have 10 instances where we have building a city. We have 5 instances where we have building a city, non-residential business buildings, and so on. But they seem a little bit spread, so we will try to cluster them to see if we can make these keywords more consistent. For example, here we can see we have industrial and commercial, colon, waste and heat recovery, and then 3 times. And once we have waste and heat, but not capital H, but we have small h here. So we can cluster these 2, and then we make this category more consistent. We have here somewhere a spelling error, and so on. So we can just cluster them, and this way we can merge them and clean our data a little bit. Exactly. So Tom wanted to show here examples of a set of data that he got where there was users gave keywords to records, and some people wrote River Thames or Thames River with small r, and so on. So in this way you can just bring them together by clustering them and cleaning your data. So the tip, it's a very useful one. Faceting the data in a column gives you an overview what it is in the column for statistical purposes, or we can get breakdown of authors and how many records are associated with each one. Also, Tom was talking to us about a Chrome extension that he installed in his OpenRefine and Chrome browser, where if you click on the links that take you to the binary objects, so to the images or PDF files, if you just hover with your mouse over the link, you can see the digital representation of the object, which is really very helpful. You can also see if they work or not, and what it is, if it fits to the metadata, and so on. So now there's these URLs to images. So this is Imagus. It's called this extension to Chrome.
Sorry, Cosmina, to interrupt. Can I ask you to put your presentation on present mode, please? Yes.
Yes,
thank you
sorry.
very much. No.
Right. Okay. So now I want you to talk a little bit about data cleaning. What are the reasons for data cleaning? Maybe you want to use some old data, reorganize it, and import it into a database. I found out that OpenRefine was built especially with those types of bulk operations in mind. Like with clustering and faceting, as I showed, this is sort of a data mining, but you don't have to learn advanced data mining theory to get the results that you want. Messy data, by contrast, is when dozens of operations are necessary to reorganize your data. So, for example, consider, let's say you are in a library and you have visitors, and they sign in your logbook. First time they sign J.Smith, second time they come over, they sign John Smith, and then there's white space in front of the name, a spelling mistake, and so on. As we very well know that it's very often the case with the data sets that we have. There's several operations are needed to transform this column, maybe sometimes a transformation for each entry. And for example, if we want to delete leading white spaces, so the white space, the space sign in front of the name, you OpenRefine realize, okay, this is very often the case with data, so they offered a feature to do that. So from the drop-down menu for each column, you go into Edit Cells, Common Transform, and then you can choose Trim Leading and Trailing White Space, and then voila, your data is a little bit more clean as it was before. Right, improving structure. Here, I wanted to talk a little bit about splitting columns. Oh, there's Tom.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, Tom.
At chapter 6,
Hi.
improving structure. Did you want to take this over, or should I?
Yes, I'll take over. Well, apologies. I didn't realize. I think we got. I got caught up with the time difference between Central European time and British time. So apologies for that. If you perhaps if you could talk about what is happening. Perhaps if you could talk about what you've done so far, Cosmina, and in that time I can get something up and running.
Yeah,
explain that.
We went through installation and importing the data into OpenRefine, the type of files that we are able to process with OpenRefine, about the visualization of OpenRefine in tabular format, and we took a look into some cleaning examples. I just finished with that, showing examples for trimming, leading, and closing white spaces. And we are just going in to improve the structure of the data, joining and merging columns.
Right. Okay. So I can take the screen. If I can take the screen, I will. If I can become the presenter, Adina. In terms of improving the structure, there's various reasons why we would want to do that, and one of the main reasons is you could have the same different kinds of information in the cells of one particular column. And as an example, I'm going to show you a data set from the early wildlife collection, and we can see that from this column here, DC subject, all the species terms and the common names for particular, mainly birdsong, but other animals as well, followed by the family that they're in. They're all in one column, they're all in one cell, and in order to split them up, as you would do in an Excel, it's very straightforward. So what I would do is I would go to edit column, and then you can see there's split into several columns, and so at that point you can see that it's asking you how to split a column, and it's suggesting that they're separated by a comma. I don't want that because they're all split up by semicolons, so I'm going to add a semicolon there. It's also asking, do you want to split into a certain number of columns? Yes, I do, because I don't want to go further. I don't want to get a whole mass of columns. I just want two. I want to save the first one. And then it says to me, after splitting, do you want to remove this column? I don't. I want to keep that column on its own so I can still use that column for something else. So if I do that, I can click OK. And here you are. There is the subject 2 and subject 3. Subject 2 has got the species name for each one, and subject 3 has got the common name followed by the genus. So they are split up, and the column that we want is this one. If you want to rename it, it's very, very simple. I can rename it by and I can add it, I'll call it species. Okay, there we are. And then if we want to, if we also want to join columns, again, it's on the drop-down list, and you can join columns. You can suggest which columns are put together so that they're all together, and you can say what the separator should be. So effectively, you could just select species name plus DC subject 3 and join them up by a semicolon, and it would go back to how they were. So you can reorder, rename, and remove columns in OpenRefine, and sorting in OpenRefine also sorts the rows. The original order of the rows is maintained, but you can then choose another column and say, right, reorder under that column, and then reorder it permanently, and then that column will become the effectively the identifying column at that point. I'll now hand back over to Cosmina.
So there's a lot of operations that can be done with OpenRefine. They're called transformations in OpenRefine. You might want to ask, what is that? This is ways of manipulating data in the columns that we have seen. So I'm going to show a few two examples in the next slides. An easy one and a more complicated one, but there's a multitude of transformation possibilities that are available with OpenRefine. The transformations are normally written in a special language that's called GREL, G-R-E-L, General Refined Expression Language. Some GREL expressions are similar to Excel formulas that you might know, but Excel focuses on numerical transformation, and GREL focuses especially on literal and text manipulations. So to start writing your transformation, you select the column on which you want to perform a transformation. And from the drop-down menu, you select Edit Cells, Transform, and then you have this form in front of you. And where it says Expression, the default value is value. So you are shown on the left side the values that you have now at present in that column, and on the right side the values after the transformation. So on the next slide, we wrote their value dot replace. We want to replace the semicolon with a dash. So on the left column, you still have the semicolon in your text, in your values, and after value replace, you have the dash. This is, of course, possible with anything you want to find and replace. And in the next slide, there's the possibility of extracting only values that you want and need from a certain column. For the most often scenario that I had in one column is shown at and is shown by mixed together, and I wanted to extract only the links that contained JPEG at the end, so I can separate is shown at from is shown by, as an example. But here in our example, because of it's easier to show it, I wanted to extract only the values that include Gesundheitspolitik and make column only with those. So I found this command. We filter the values in our column and we split them at comma, and we take over only the ones that include Gesundheitspolitik. And there we have our column that we can use for further purposes. In the next slide, there's the possibility shown here how to build a link. For example, you have a column where you have only the IDs for some records, but you would like to build a link using that ID. So in the form that you have in Common Transforms, in the field for expression, you type the part of the link that you would like to have glued to your ID, which is HTTP DNB info, and then after that you can have the ID that is in the column. And on the right side here you have the results, so you can fix some errors. If you made any errors, you can fix them, and it shows the end results. Right, and now a very powerful feature of OpenRefine is reconciling and enriching, which Tom will show. Tom, to repeat.
Hi again. So the reconcile function is a very useful function because you can pull data over from other resources. These are 6 of the main resources. One is Wikidata, which we're going to have a look at, but there's also ones such as Library of Congress and Getty and the virtual international authority file. So let's have a look and see, go back to our wildlife collection, and we're going to have a look at the species, and we're going to the species column that we made up earlier, and we are going to reconcile that, and we're going to add some Wikidata links to that. So clicking on the drop down options, go to reconcile, and then start reconciling. You can see that Wikidata is already in there as an option, so I'm going to pick that one. And it's asking me, well, do I want to have a taxon for this kind of thing, because it looks like the sort of information that I'd be needing. And so I am saying, yes, that's exactly what I want. And I can then start reconciling. And you can see up at the top, there's a yellow box, and it's saying that it's so far done 0%. It actually takes a little bit of time to do this. I'm thinking usually for this number of rows, it could be a couple of minutes, something like that. And you can see the rate that it's going, but I'm going to cancel that because I'm going to show you what it's going to look like once that's happened. So using the species column, it's matched up a Wikidata entry, and that's a Wikidata entry for the common redstart. If I click over that, it shows all the different Wikipedia articles that redstart is involved with, all the different languages for common redstart. So from there, you can link up to different Wikipedia articles. Let's go back, because for this next one, which is the blue tit, it has asked me, there are different Wikidata links, and it's saying these top two are the 100% match. And I can choose to match it to the blue tit. I'm going to actually match it to this one. And then if I click on all identical cells, then any other cell which has got that Parus caeruleus in it is also going to be matched to that particular Wikidata. So I can do that. I can go to the willow tit. I like the willow tit because it's got a picture. I will match it to that. And then I can keep on going through to other. Most of them have already been given a Wikidata link. And from there, once I'm happy with all the links that are there, I can then add this piece of code. Well, it's not code, but if I copy that and transform cells, that is going to create Wikidata links with the Q numbers, and it will transform it into Q numbers. So reconcile function you can use for species names, you can use for names of authors and get VIAF links for those. You can also get it for other subjects, and it's a very useful tool. It needs reviewing to make sure that you're picking the right terms, but it's certainly very helpful when you're dealing with many thousands of records. So this is another example which Cosmina has added. This is a way of getting another enrichment for names, for creators, and it's doing the same thing. It's creating links from the information that you've given it. So it'll suggest Wikidata terms that match the subject entries. I'll now hand back to Cosmina.
Thank you, Tom. So exporting data. You can export the data from an existing OpenRefine because after you perform your operations and clean your data, it's only normal you would like to be able to save your data and use it for other purposes. In the next slide, I can show you how to export the project and the data. On the right side in the OpenRefine screen, you have possibilities to export your project, and with it, all the operations that you performed. Also, you can export the data as a TSV or a CSV, HTML, Excel, any other tabular exporter. But what I found extremely helpful was that you can make your own templates to export the data. So you can export the data in a certain format like Dublin Core or EDM. In the next slide, we can see the default templating of OpenRefine, which is JSON. Here in the red area, you have your elements, your columns that you had in your OpenRefine project. And here in the purple area, it's how they would look like if they would be exported with a default template of OpenRefine. On the right, where it says templating export, this is an export that I wrote for exporting data in EDM format, where we write the prefix at the top and define our namespaces. And then in row template, we write the templating for each of the columns, which will be then elements, and the suffix at the end of the data set. And then we can see here in the next slide how the data looked like before processing it with OpenRefine. I had a little set in Dublin Core, but I had no language attributes, no authority data. The data was a little bit inconsistent. For example, in the element DC creator, we had several creators, or in the element DC publisher, we had the publisher and the date. So we took those apart and then performed reconciliations or enrichment on names of creators, publishers, places, document types, and so on. And in the next slide, you can see how the data looked like after processing it with OpenRefine. We had in the template, I introduced also language attributes for the description, titles, and the other elements that are required to have language attributes. And also I enriched the publisher, the creators, and so on with G&D control vocabulary URIs. In the next slide, I can show you how to back up your project. And the next slide after this, please. Exactly. So here we have the operation history. We can see here on the left every single operation that we performed with OpenRefine. A very useful feature is that you can go back at any time and undo your operations. You can go back at the very beginning and change the operations, and also you can copy them, and by extracting them where the orange arrow is pointing, you can extract all these steps that you used in order to process your data. Here in this format, the steps are in JSON format, and you can save them in a form, in a notepad, in a file, for example. And if you get an update for your set, which has the same structure as the set you just processed, you can run these steps by using apply, where the purple arrow is pointing, and in no time you have all the changes and corrections you have performed on the original set. So you can export your project so that somebody else can use it on their machine. You can export your data in various formats, and you can export the operations you performed for a project. And in the end, there's in the next slide just a few useful links. In the next slide. In GitHub, there's a very extensive collection of links for OpenRefine that are curated by the community. And also a very, very useful tutorial that I found on library carpentry that shows us various other possibilities of transformation. There's links to recipes, so there are command lines for transformations that you can use for various operations, and there's various tutorials on YouTube. So yeah, that was it, and we're now open for questions and discussion.
Thank you very much, Cosmina and Tom, for this presentation. We have a few minutes now for questions and answers, and at the moment, looking at the form, there is one question from Tamara in Serbia, so let's begin with that. We have also some other questions to follow up with if we have time. Just to say that if you have questions that you would like to enter once this is over, you can carry on completing the form, yeah? So Tamara's question, and we will try to answer these questions and make the answers available, whether they come now or whether they come later. So Tamara's question is regards, as I understand it, the results of surveys, whether it's possible to import the results of surveys into OpenRefine in some shape or form. I don't know whether Tom or Cosmina, you feel able to answer that question as it stands, or whether you'd like Tamara to elucidate and expand a little bit on the question itself.
Yeah, I would like to ask Tamara to explain a little bit what she means.
Tamara, can you open your microphone and speak?
Sorry. Hi, everyone. Hi, Cosmina. I wanted to know whether this OpenRefine has some possibilities for visualization of data, actually.
Visualization in which way? Because you have the tabular format where you can visualize the data. You can just browse through it. You can you have another possibility of visualizing your data using the faceting that I showed before, and you can use it for statistical purposes. And also to visualize the data, I always try to export the data in the format that I want it to be in, and I can take a look at it at the end results, so to speak. So you have various possibilities of looking at the data. You're very close to the data. So yeah, faceting and clustering, also the tabular format and exporting of the data.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Does that answer your question, Tamara? Is that what you wanted to know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks.
Okay. Laura is now answering a question on if there's time. Could you repeat how to export data in EDM? I didn't really get it.
Yes, sure. So you can export the data from OpenRefine using in different formats like HTML, Excel, and so on. But OpenRefine offers you a template that is default, which is JSON, or you can just delete that default and write your own template. And you have to write for each column the template for exporting that element in OpenRefine. So Tom, if you could go back to slide 43, please. So here on the left, where in the red area is your data as you have it in OpenRefine. In the purple area, OpenRefine suggests a default templating for the export, which is in JSON format. But if you want another template like EDM, you delete everything that is here in the purple area and write your own template for each element. So for DC title, you write the export template for a DC identifier and so on. So here, if you look at templating export, it's not really complete. You can see, you cannot see everything, but here is written. So for all cells that contain a value, so they are not blank, not empty, you take the values from provider item ID and you pack them under or aggregation under the element EDM is shown at, for example. Or here DC rights goes to EDM rights. So you perform a sort of a mapping, and if you write a template, you can apply the same templating for various data sets without having to write one again. So, or maybe slightly changing it for other sets. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Cosmina, and also Laura. Adina has now started to enter some of the questions, at least one of the questions that we thought you might be interested in. So I'll put that question. This is to Cosmina and Tom, would your data partners be interested in using this tool at source so that you already receive clean data? Or are they in fact already doing it? Cosmina, do you have a view on
that? Not really. I mean, we have data providers that offer the data over OAI PMH, and they programmed the interface like that for various purposes. So it's not only EVM or the DDB they would like to export the data for, and they will not change it for us, or it's too complicated to change it for us. So while some of them might be interested, maybe the ones that have the resources, they might try to use it. I am not aware of data partners that use this tool. The museums, for example, they use their own export tools for the Lido format. But we are trying here at the DDB to just unify the data from various providers in a sort of a common structure. Tom, you also have some experience with this, right?
Yeah, I mean, very much what Cosmina says. Actually, I think I would, because I use OpenRefine quite a bit, I'm able to look at a data set from a data provider, and I would be able to say to them, look, there's just a few things here and there that just need to be applied to all 50,000 of your recordings, for example. And I would be able to do that for you. I mean, that's usually how I would do that. Some data providers will have provided this data, and then the people who've done it have moved to another project. So the person that I'm in contact with may not have the time, or just may not have the skills to do this. So I think it's a very powerful tool to be able to just to see how something can be slightly revised. And if you have this, if you're used to the faceting and the cleaning of data, then what seems an impossibly laborious exercise actually becomes quite simple. So I would be very, very happy to to offer training to data providers on this, but I think it's actually a very good aggregator tool.
Thanks very much, Tom. So now we have two more questions. First of all, I'll leave Henning till last, okay, because he's on the home team. Question here from Lois. How does it work to get another source like a thesaurus available for reconciling other than Wikidata? Any observations on that, Cosmina or Tom?
Well, Cosmina, perhaps you could say more about the ones that you've used.
I use GND, which is the Gemeinsame Normdatei. It's called the controlled vocabulary used by libraries in Germany. If you want to add an extension to a reconciling service, there's a list of extensions available under the link that where you download OpenRefine from. And then when you want to perform, maybe you can make me presenter and I can show you hands-on. Adina, please. Oops, sorry. Can you do that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're presenter now, Cosmina.
Yeah. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say you would like to enrich this column, the keywords, with URIs. There is this service that is listed in the list where you download OpenRefine from, which is the lob ID for the GND. And here you find this link, which is a reconciliation link for OpenRefine. You copy this link and you go to the column that you would like to reconcile, drop down menu, reconcile, start reconciling, and then here you have buttons saying add standard service. Wikidata is default, but then you have the possibility of adding other services. Add service. And now we have the service, the GND OpenRefine reconciliation service installed. Then for a more precise reconciliation, you can tell OpenRefine if it is a geographical, or if it's places you're looking for, or persons, and so on. And then you start reconciling, and then you get some suggestions like Tom also shown, and you can decide for one of them.
Thank you very much. Since my dog has just started barking, Henning, would you like to put your question directly to the group? Henning,
Sure.
did you get that?
Yeah. It takes a while to get the microphone back. I was just wondering, like, almost like as a getting towards the conclusion, we have lots of people here on the call. I'm not sure how many people are using OpenRefine already, or people are leaving, or want to use it in the future. How could it be best organized, supporting others learning as much as you have done over the years with OpenRefine? Would you be able or willing to offer support if there are questions coming like after that webinar, or do you have different thoughts on how we could organize supporting others working with OpenRefine?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'd be very happy to offer. I mean, I think at the British Library, I've started a user group on our Yammer. So it's just a sort of a place to sort of post up tips and that sort of thing. So I'm sure that there could be some kind of OpenRefine user group on Basecamp, and if people have a question, then if Cosmina or I, sorry, I'm volunteering you a little bit, Cosmina, but you know, if we didn't have the answer, then we'd be able to sort of find a way of getting back to people, I'm sure.
That would be a great idea, of course. I think what will help would be hands-on webinar maybe, but where everybody, we've done that for the DDB once, where everybody, all the participants brought in a data set that they uploaded into OpenRefine, and we worked hands-on on that data set, and people were able to perform various operations right there, the simpler ones, and then after they got acquainted with OpenRefine a little bit more, then they can start using it themselves. And a group like that would be really useful to set up for Europeana OpenRefine users, I'm sure, where we can, for example, share the so-called recipes like commands for transformations or templates and so on.
Yeah.
Well, this sounds great. Now, Adina, we had our allotted hour, I think. Do we have time for any more questions, or do you want to round up now?
Yeah, we still have time for some questions if there are other questions.
I don't think we have any more questions in the form, but we have one or two that we right. So then, for example, question about a group of things. Do you need whether you need a training period to get familiar with this tool, and how you then begin to integrate the tool into your workflow? Do you have any observations on that, Tom or Cosmina?
Well, I think it's just crash and burn, really. You have an introduction. It is one of those programs where you just have to bite the bullet, install it, put a CSV in, click around, see what you get out of it. I think it just becomes apparent that there's quite a lot of functions that make life a lot simpler than Google Sheets or Excel. But I mean, I think as well as that, one of the things I found was I know there was something that I was trying to do, and I couldn't quite put in the right words into Google that would get the answer, because there's quite a different language there. But there's quite a lot of information on GitHub on those links that we sent you, and quite a lot of discussion that shows when somebody says, "Oh, I'm trying to do this," and then somebody else has answered and gives them a sort of a step-by-step procedure. And it's I think that's why it would be quite good to have some kind of forum, because then then we can together all together be discussing what the issue is and what solution there may be for them.
Yeah, that's a good idea, and I think you're right when you say crash and burn, because this is the way I learned it as well. And in my experience, the biggest difficulty was to export the data after I cleaned it and I performed all my operations. I was happy with it. I beautified my data, but I wanted to use it after I did that. So exporting was for me the most difficult operation. So a forum where we share that knowledge with one another, answering questions like, how do I do that? Because I'm sure that the operations we need to perform are very similar. That would be great to organize something like that. And also on Stack Overflow, this software forum. There is an OpenRefine subgroup, and they're really well organized, and they answer questions really, really quickly.
I mean,
99% of them.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I didn't know was how to export to EDM. So it's been good to be involved in this webinar, because Cosmina's been able to demonstrate how that's done. But I'd also say there's things that you can do with Mint as well, because we at the Europeana Sounds we would use Mint as a mapping tool, but you know, it just depends on what programs you're used to using at the moment, and OpenRefine could do everything for you if you wanted it to. If you wanted to sort of do all the coding and organizing yourself, or it could fill in the gaps between what you've got. So you might, you know, it might fill the gaps between your online database and Mint or some other mapping tool.
Yeah, exactly. And we haven't talked about the disadvantages of OpenRefine. It's got its limits. So the biggest set that I was able to process with OpenRefine had 150,000 records, and at the beginning, after I uploaded the data, it had over 1 million lines. So it can get very slow when you have this amount of data. What helps is split your set in subsets, and after you ran your operations for one set, you copy, like I showed, you copy the operations and run them on the other sets, which will take a little bit of time, of course.
The other thing you can do, if you've got a very, very big data set, you can allocate more RAM, more memory
Yes.
to OpenRefine, because I think it starts off, it just thinks that about a megabyte or no, gigabyte of RAM is good enough, but actually you can beef it up to say 4 gigabytes. It's probably not good to go over 50% of the total memory that you've got, but you can, if you've got 16 gigabytes of RAM, then you could allocate 8 gigabytes to OpenRefine, and then that will probably be good for about a million records. But even then, there could just be, you know, there's something, because it is working on your own PC. It's not. It has the limitations that a web-based system that's just working on a server somewhere else may not have.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Time for one more, Adina. Or... I'm going to take that as a yes then. Okay, I realise that people will have other things to do, but so the question which interests me is, why OpenRefine? Are there other, do you know of other tools out there which do similar things or related things? Why would you, in what circumstances would you choose OpenRefine over any other tools which may exist?
Other than Mint, I'm not aware of other tools, actually.
No, I mean, I think it's there would be other things that people would be more comfortable with using Python and other program languages that would be a bit more kind of getting onto the nuts and bolts of data revision. I don't actually. No, I mean, until now, I was really just using Google Sheets and Excel, and then also Mint, and then I think for me the real benefit for OpenRefine is it does allow you to be able to take a very good overview of and gives a breakdown, not just when you sort out your rows into a particular order, to facet it down to say, right, okay, there's 3,000 Dickens, 2,000 Gunter Grass, 4,000 Ernest Hemingway, and just be able to sort of see things as a whole. I think that is a very good advantage to it.
Okay, thank you very much. So it sounds like OpenRefine is the go-to.
This answers Tamara's question, if OpenRefine is suitable for results of surveys, because this statistical overview over faceting, it's exactly what you would like to see. This is especially good for that. And in my experience, the smaller sets are messier than the big sets, which are automatically generated. So for the smaller sets from the smaller institutions, we get really basic data, sometimes in Excel tables or in Word tables and stuff like that. So it's very difficult to put that in a normal format, so to speak. So OpenRefine helps here a lot.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, I think we're probably out of time now. Thank you very much, Tom and Cosmina. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to hand back now to Adina to close this session off.
Yes.
If you have more questions, if anyone has more questions, enter them into the form, and we will try to get answers out to any questions that come in. Yeah. Thank you, Adina.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending, Tom and Cosmina, for your presentation. And yeah, I'll be sharing things on Basecamp with you. So that was it for today. See you next time.